The blood had dried hours ago, but Nora Shepherd could still feel it caked beneath her fingernails as she stumbled through the dusty streets of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, trying to keep her trembling legs from giving out beneath her. It was October 1878, and the sun bore down mercilessly on her torn dress and bloodied skin, making the scratches on her arms and face sting with renewed fury. She clutched the ripped fabric of her bodice together with one hand while the other braced against the weathered wooden posts lining the boardwalk, each step an act of sheer willpower. People stared. She could feel their eyes boring into her, could hear the whispers starting to spread like wildfire through the small mountain town. A woman alone, disheveled and injured, was enough to set tongues wagging for months. She had been traveling from Little Rock to meet her brother, who had promised her work at the general store he managed in Eureka Springs. The stagecoach had been attacked 3 miles outside of town by a group of drifters looking for easy money. They had gotten more than money. Nora pushed the memories down, refusing to let them surface while she was still standing in broad daylight. She needed shelter. She needed water. She needed someone, anyone, to help her. The doctor's office appeared like a mirage through her blurring vision. She lurched toward it, nearly falling against the door before managing to turn the handle. Inside, the cool darkness provided immediate relief from the scorching sun. An older man with wire-rimmed spectacles looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from mild annoyance at the interruption to alarm as he took in her appearance. "Good God, woman," he said, rising quickly and moving toward her. "What happened to you?" Nora opened her mouth to speak, but the words would not come. Her knees buckled and everything went black. When consciousness returned, she found herself lying on a narrow cot covered with clean white sheets. Her dress had been removed, replaced by a simple cotton nightgown. Bandages covered her arms and she could feel the tight pull of stitches along her left shoulder. The doctor sat in a chair beside the cot, reading a medical journal by lamplight. Evening had fallen. "You are awake," he observed, setting down his reading material. "I am Dr. Hastings. You have been unconscious for several hours. Your injuries are significant but not life-threatening. Most concerning are the defensive wounds on your forearms and the deep laceration on your shoulder. You fought back, did you not?" Nora's throat felt like sandpaper. "Water," she managed to whisper. He provided a cup which she drained greedily. When she could finally speak, she said, "The stagecoach. They attacked the stagecoach." Dr. Hastings nodded gravely. "The driver made it to town about an hour ago. He was injured as well, but he managed to fight them off long enough to escape with the horses. He said there was a woman passenger, but he thought." The doctor trailed off delicately. "He thought I was dead," Nora finished. "I pretended to be after they." She could not continue. "You need not explain," the doctor said kindly. "The important thing is that you survived. However, I must ask if you have family or means to support yourself. The town marshal will want a statement and you will need somewhere to stay while you recover." "My brother, Samuel Shepherd. He manages the general store." "Ah, yes, I know Samuel. I will send word to him immediately." But when Samuel arrived an hour later, his face was not filled with the relief and concern Nora had expected. Instead, he looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. He stood stiffly near the door, refusing to meet her eyes. "Samuel," Nora said, confusion mixing with the pain medication the doctor had given her. "What is wrong?" Her brother cleared his throat. "Nora, this is very difficult. My wife, you see, she is a prominent member of the Church Ladies' Society. And with the talk already spreading about what happened to you on that stagecoach, she feels it would be improper for you to stay with us. It would damage her reputation." The words hit Nora like a physical blow. "Improper." Samuel, I was attacked. I was nearly killed. I understand that, truly I do, but Margaret insists. However, I have made arrangements. There is a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She has agreed to give you a room at reduced rates, and I will cover the first month's rent. As for employment, well, the store position has been filled, but I am certain you can find something else. Nora stared at her brother in disbelief. They had written letters for months planning her move to Eureka Springs. She had sold everything she owned in Little Rock to afford the stagecoach fare, and now he was abandoning her because his wife was worried about gossip. "Get out," she said quietly. "Nora, please understand, get out." This time she shouted it, ignoring the pain that flared through her shoulder. "You are no brother of mine." Samuel left quickly, clearly relieved to escape. Dr. Hastings, who had witnessed the entire exchange from his desk, shook his head sadly. "I am sorry, Miss Shepherd. Unfortunately, small towns can be crueler than the wilderness sometimes." Nora turned her face to the wall and let the tears come. She stayed in the doctor's office for 3 more days before she was well enough to move to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson was a stern-faced woman in her 60s who made it clear that Nora's reduced rent came with expectations of help around the house. Nora did not mind. She needed to stay busy, needed to keep her hands and mind occupied so she would not dwell on the attack or her brother's betrayal. The scars were the worst part. The cuts and bruises healed, but the scars remained, angry red lines crisscrossing her arms where she had tried to fight off her attackers. The deepest one ran from her left shoulder down across her collarbone, a permanent reminder of the knife that had torn through her dress and skin. She took to wearing long sleeves even in the warm autumn weather, unable to bear the looks she received when people saw the marks. Finding work proved nearly impossible. Her brother had been right about one thing: the gossip had spread quickly. Everyone in Eureka Springs knew what had happened to her, and most had decided it somehow reflected poorly on her character. The seamstress would not hire her because customers might be uncomfortable. The hotel said they had no positions available, though Nora had seen a help wanted sign in the window just the day before. Even the laundry refused her, claiming they had enough workers. After 2 weeks of rejections, Nora's carefully saved money was running dangerously low. Mrs. Patterson had been patient, but she would expect the next month's rent soon, and Nora had no way to pay it. She sat in her small room one evening, staring at the few possessions she had left, wondering if she should try to sell them or use the money to buy a ticket back to Little Rock. But there was nothing for her in Little Rock either. She had burned those bridges when she left. The next morning, desperation drove her to do something she had been avoiding. She went to the saloon. The Silver Dollar Saloon was the largest establishment in Eureka Springs, a 2-story building with a gaudy false front and constantly swinging doors. Nora had walked past it dozens of times, averting her eyes from the painted women who sometimes stood on the balcony, calling down to potential customers. She had been raised to believe that respectable women did not enter such places. But respectability had not kept her fed or housed, and she was running out of options. The owner, a heavy-set man named Douglas Kern, looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism when she asked about work. "I need a cook or a cleaning woman," Nora said quickly. "I can do accounts as well. I have a good education." Kern scratched his considerable belly. "I've got a cook and cleaning gets done by the girls upstairs. As for accounts, I do my own." "Please," Nora said, hating the desperation in her voice. "I will do any honest work." "Honest work," Kern repeated with a slight smile. "Well now, the only position I have got open is for a girl to work the floor, serve drinks, talk to the customers, encourage them to spend money. The pay is decent and you keep your tips. Nora's stomach sank. I would be serving drinks, nothing else. That is up to you, Kern said with a shrug. Some of the girls make arrangements on their own time, but I do not require it. I just need you to be friendly, keep the drinks flowing, and look pretty. Though, he gestured toward her long-sleeved dress. You would need to wear something more fitting. The customers like to see a little skin. Nothing indecent, mind you, just fashionable. The thought of wearing a low-cut dress that would expose her scarred shoulder and arms made Nora feel ill. But what choice did she have? I will take the position, she said. But I need to wear long sleeves, Kern frowned. That is not what the customers expect. Then I cannot work here. Nora turned to leave, fighting back tears of frustration. Wait, Kern called after her. Look, you seem like you have had some hard times. Tell you what, you can start wearing whatever you want, but if the customers complain, you will need to switch to the regular uniform. Deal. It was better than nothing. Nora nodded. She started that very evening, wearing the most presentable dress she owned with its long sleeves and high collar. The other saloon girls looked at her curiously, clearly wondering why Kern had hired someone so modestly dressed, but they were kind enough once they realized she was not putting on airs. A woman named Pauline, who had been working at the Silver Dollar for 3 years, showed her the ropes. Just smile, laugh at their jokes even when they are not funny, and keep the whiskey coming, Pauline advised. Most of these men are lonely and just want someone to talk to. The ones who get handsy, you tell Kern or one of the regulars and they will sort it out. We look after each other here. Nora found the work exhausting but manageable. Her feet ached from standing all night, and the smoky air irritated her lungs, but she was earning money. The customers were mostly cowboys, ranch hands, and occasional prospectors passing through. They drank, played cards, and told exaggerated stories about cattle drives and Indian fights. Some tried to flirt with her, but when she politely rebuffed them, they generally moved on to more receptive company. It was on her 5th night working at the Silver Dollar that Tate Thompson walked in. Nora noticed him immediately because he was different from the usual clientele. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean build that suggested strength earned through hard work rather than brawling. His clothing was worn but clean, typical cowboy gear: sturdy denim pants, a chambray shirt, leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. But it was his manner that truly set him apart. He moved with quiet confidence, nodding politely to Kern before taking a seat at a corner table where he could see the whole room. When Nora approached to take his order, he removed his hat, revealing sun-browned skin and dark hair slightly too long, curling at his collar. His eyes were a startling light brown, almost amber, and they met hers with directness that made her breath catch. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice low and pleasant. "Just whiskey, if you please." "Right away," Nora managed, hurrying back to the bar. Her hands shook slightly as she poured the drink. She told herself it was just fatigue, but she knew that was a lie. When she returned with his whiskey, he thanked her and paid, adding a generous tip. "You are new here," he observed. "Just arrived in town." "A few weeks ago," Nora said carefully. In her experience, customers who asked questions either wanted gossip or had other intentions, but Tate just nodded. "I hope Eureka Springs is treating you well. It is a good town, despite what some might say." There was something in his tone that made Nora look at him more closely. He was not just making conversation, he seemed to genuinely care about her answer. "It has been an adjustment," she said diplomatically. "I imagine so." He took a sip of his whiskey, then added, "If you need anything, any help at all, you can ask for me. Tate Thompson. I work at the Triple T Ranch about 10 miles north of town." "Why would you offer help to a stranger?" The question came out more sharply than Nora intended, but she was tired of men with ulterior motives. Tate did not seem offended. Because when I first came to Arkansas 5 years ago, I was a stranger too, and someone helped me when I needed it. Figure I should pay that forward when I can. He stood, placing his hat back on his head. You have a good evening, miss. He left without finishing his drink, and Nora found herself staring after him, confused and oddly touched. Tate came back to the Silver Dollar 3 nights later. Again, he sat at the same corner table, ordered whiskey, and engaged in brief but polite conversation with Nora when she served him. This time he asked her name. Nora Shepherd, she said, then immediately worried he would recognize it from the gossip. Everyone knew about the woman who had been attacked on the stagecoach, but if he made the connection, he gave no sign of it. That is a pretty name, suits you. Over the following weeks, Tate became a regular fixture at the Silver Dollar. He came in 2 or 3 times a week, always sitting at his corner table, always ordering the same drink, and always treating Nora with unfailing courtesy. He never tried to touch her inappropriately or make suggestive comments like some of the other customers. Instead, he asked about her day, told her stories about the ranch where he worked, and listened with genuine interest when she talked about her love of reading or her opinions on the changing seasons. Nora found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She had sworn off men after the attack, convinced she could never trust anyone again. But Tate was different. There was a gentleness to him that contradicted his rough appearance, a respect in the way he spoke to her that she had rarely experienced even before the attack. One evening in late November, a cowboy named Frank Dawson had too much to drink and grabbed Nora's wrist as she passed his table, trying to pull her into his lap. She jerked away, but he held tight, laughing drunkenly. "Come on, sweetheart, just a little fun," he slurred. "Let go of me," Nora said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady even as panic clawed at her throat. The feeling of a man's hand gripping her brought back memories of the attack, of being held down, of fighting uselessly against superior strength. "The lady asked you to let go." Tate's voice cut through the noise of the saloon like a knife. He had crossed the room so quickly Nora had not seen him move. Now he stood beside their table, his hand resting lightly on Frank's shoulder. There was no obvious threat in his posture, but something in his tone made Frank release Nora's wrist immediately. "Did not mean nothing by it," Frank muttered. "Just joking around." "I am sure you were," Tate said calmly, "but the joke is over now. Why do not you settle your tab and head on home?" Frank looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at Tate's face changed his mind. He tossed some coins on the table and stumbled out. The saloon's noise gradually resumed its normal level. Nora realized she was shaking. "Thank you," she managed to say to Tate. "Are you all right?" He asked, and the genuine concern in his eyes nearly undid her. "I am fine," she lied. "It happens sometimes, part of the job." "It should not be part of any job," Tate said quietly. "Nora, if you need to step outside for some air, I will make sure no one bothers you." The kindness was too much. Nora felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "I need to work." "You need to breathe," Tate corrected gently. "Come on." He guided her through the saloon and out the back door into the cool November night. Nora leaned against the building's rough wooden wall, taking deep gulps of clean air. Her heart was racing and she could not seem to slow it down. "I am sorry," she said, embarrassed by her reaction. "I do not know why I am being so foolish." "You are not being foolish," Tate said. He stood a respectful distance away, giving her space. "Something frightened you. That is nothing to apologize for." Nora looked at him, this man who had shown her nothing but kindness, and suddenly she wanted him to know, needed him to know. "I was attacked," she said abruptly. A few weeks before I came to Eureka Springs, on the stagecoach from Little Rock, there were 3 of them and they. She swallowed hard. The driver escaped and I pretended to be dead. That is how I survived. Tate's expression did not change, but she saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. I am sorry that happened to you, he said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. No one deserves that. No one. Everyone in town knows, Nora continued, the words spilling out now that she had started. My own brother would not take me in because his wife was worried about her reputation. No respectable business would hire me. So here I am, working in a saloon, being grabbed by drunks, and I have no right to complain because what did I expect? Stop, Tate said firmly. He took a step closer, though he still did not touch her. You have every right to expect to be treated with respect and dignity. What happened to you was not your fault, and anyone who judges you for it is a fool and a coward. Nora laughed bitterly. That is most of Eureka Springs, then. Then most of Eureka Springs is wrong. Tate's amber eyes blazed with conviction. Nora, you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You survived something terrible, and instead of giving up, you are fighting to build a new life. That takes courage most people cannot even imagine. I do not feel strong, Nora whispered. I feel broken. You are not broken, you are scarred. There is a difference. Tate hesitated, then asked, May I tell you something about myself? Nora nodded, grateful for the shift in focus. I grew up in Texas, Tate said. My father was a rancher and he had a temper like a rattlesnake. When he drank, which was often, he would beat my mother and us kids for any reason or no reason at all. I tried to protect my younger sister and brothers, but I was just a boy. I could not stop him. He looked down at his hands. When I was 16, he came home drunk and started in on my mother. I put myself between them and he broke 3 of my ribs and my left arm, told me if I ever interfered again, he would kill me. Oh, Tate, Nora breathed. I left that night, Tate continued. Took my sister and brothers and ran. We made it to a neighbor's ranch and they took us in. My mother eventually left too and we all survived. But for a long time, I felt like a coward for running instead of fighting back, for not being strong enough to protect my family. He met her eyes. It was the rancher who took us in, who told me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive. That living through the hurt and building something better, that is real courage. Nora felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Where is your family now? My mother remarried, a good man this time. She lives in Oklahoma. My sister married a blacksmith in Fort Smith. My brothers work a ranch in Texas, far from where we grew up, and my father drank himself to death 2 years after we left. Tate's voice held no satisfaction, just resignation. I came to Arkansas looking for a fresh start and I found it. You can too, Nora. I do not know how, she admitted. One day at a time, Tate said. And you do not have to do it alone. I meant what I said before. If you need help, I am here. They stood in the quiet night, the distant sounds of the saloon drifting through the closed door. Nora felt something shifting inside her, a tiny crack in the wall she had built around her heart. I should get back to work, she said finally. Tate nodded. I will walk you back in. True to his word, Tate became a steady presence in Nora's life. He continued visiting the Silver Dollar regularly, but now she understood he was not just another lonely cowboy looking for companionship. He was checking on her, making sure she was all right, offering silent support simply by being there. When other customers got too friendly, Tate would catch Nora's eye and position himself nearby without making a scene. His presence alone was often enough to discourage trouble. December arrived, bringing cold rain and occasional sleet that turned Eureka Springs streets to mud. The mountains surrounding the town wore caps of snow, and the mineral springs that gave the area its name steamed in the frigid air. Business at the Silver Dollar slowed as the weather worsened, with only the hardiest souls venturing out for their evening drink. On one particularly miserable night, Nora had just finished her shift when she discovered that the walk back to the boarding house, usually manageable, had become treacherous. Ice coated the boardwalks, and a bitter wind cut through her wool cloak. She had barely made it half a block when she heard hoofbeats behind her. "Nora, wait," Tate called. He rode up beside her on a sturdy paint horse, dismounting quickly. "You should not be walking in this weather. Let me give you a ride." "I could not impose," Nora started to say, but Tate was already unfastening his heavy coat. "You are not imposing. I am offering." He draped the coat around her shoulders over her cloak. "Please, I would feel better knowing you got home safely." The coat was warm from his body heat and smelled of leather and something indefinably masculine. Nora pulled it closer, unable to deny how good it felt. "All right," she said. "Thank you." Tate helped her mount the horse, then swung up behind her. The closeness made Nora's heart race, but it was not fear she felt. Tate kept his hands on the reins, careful not to touch her more than necessary, but she could feel his warmth at her back, solid and reassuring. The ride to the boarding house took only minutes, but Nora found herself wishing it could last longer. When they arrived, Tate dismounted first, then helped her down with the same careful courtesy. "Keep the coat," he said when she started to remove it. "You can return it next time I see you." "You will freeze," Nora protested. "I've got a vest and I am not far from the ranch. I will be fine." He smiled, and Nora realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less guarded. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Tate." "And thank you for everything." She watched him ride away into the sleeting darkness, clutching his coat around her. Mrs. Patterson met her at the door with a knowing look. "That cowboy is sweet on you," the older woman observed. Nora felt her cheeks heat. "He is just being kind." "Kind, Mrs. Patterson repeated with a snort. "Men are not just kind to women they are not interested in, girl, especially not men like that one. He has been courting you in case you have not noticed." "Courting me?" Nora shook her head. "No, we are just friends." "If you say so, Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "But if you are worried about what happened to you, about whether you are still worth courting, put those thoughts out of your head. What those animals did does not define you, and any decent man knows that." Nora wanted to believe her, but the scars on her body were a constant reminder of that terrible day. She touched her shoulder through the layers of clothing, tracing the line of the worst scar. How could anyone see past these marks? How could anyone want someone so damaged? Over the next few weeks, Tate's visits became more frequent and more personal. He started arriving earlier in the evening, before the saloon got crowded, and would sit at his table talking with Nora whenever she had a free moment. She learned that he was 24 years old, just 3 years older than her. He had been working at the Triple T Ranch since he came to Arkansas, starting as a simple hand and working his way up to foreman. He loved the work, loved being outdoors with the cattle and horses, though he admitted the owner could be demanding. "Mr. Thornton runs a tight operation," Tate explained one evening. "He expects perfection from his men and he does not tolerate mistakes, but he is fair, and the pay is good." "I have managed to save quite a bit." "What are you saving for?" Nora asked, curious. "My own place someday," Tate said, and there was a wistfulness in his voice that touched her. "Nothing big, maybe just a small ranch with enough land for a modest herd. A house with a real wood floor and glass windows, a stable for good horses, maybe a garden." He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "I know it is not much of a dream." "I think it sounds wonderful," Nora said honestly. The image he painted was so vivid she could almost see it. A cozy ranch house nestled in the Arkansas hills, smoke curling from the chimney, horses grazing peacefully in the pasture. It was the kind of dream she had once had for herself, before the attack shattered her illusions of a normal future. "What about you?" Tate asked. "What do you want?" Nora had to think about that. For weeks, she had been so focused on simple survival that she had not allowed herself to think beyond the next day's rent or the next meal. But now, sitting across from Tate in the warm glow of the saloon's lamps, she let herself imagine. "I want to feel safe again," she said quietly. "I want to wake up without being afraid. I want to be able to walk down the street without feeling people's eyes on me, judging me. And I want—" She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the deepest longing. "What?" Tate prompted gently. "I want to matter to someone," Nora finished. "I want to be more than just the woman who survived an attack. I want to be seen for who I am, not what happened to me." "I see you," Tate said, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I see a woman who is brave and kind and resilient. I see someone who has been knocked down but refuses to stay down. I see Nora Shepherd, and she is remarkable." Nora felt tears prickling her eyes. "You barely know me." "Then let me know you better," Tate said. "Nora, I would like to court you properly if you would allow it. I know this probably seems sudden, and I know you have reasons to be cautious. But I have never met anyone like you, and I would regret it for the rest of my life if I did not at least ask." The proposal caught Nora completely off guard. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this chance for connection and happiness with both hands. But another part, the part that still woke up screaming from nightmares, held her back. "Tate, I am not whole anymore," she said, struggling to explain. "The attack, it changed me. I have scars, not just on my body but on my soul. I do not know if I can be what you want." "You are exactly what I want," Tate said firmly. "Scars and all. Nora, I am not asking you to be perfect. I am asking if I can spend time with you, get to know you better, and see where this might lead. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people seeing if they are suited to each other." It was the least romantic proposal of courtship Nora could imagine, and somehow that made it perfect. There was no pretense, no poetry, just honest intention. She thought about her lonely room at the boarding house, about her days filled with work and nothing else, about the wall she had built around her heart. Tate was offering her a chance to live again instead of just survive. Could she be brave enough to take it? "Yes," she said, and watched his face light up with joy. "Yes, I would like that." Their courtship began tentatively, like two wild animals circling each other, testing for trust. Tate's work at the ranch kept him busy during the day, but he made time to see Nora whenever possible. On her rare afternoons off, he would borrow a wagon and take her for drives through the surrounding countryside, showing her hidden valleys and pristine springs. They talked about everything and nothing: childhood memories, favorite books, dreams for the future, opinions on whether the railroad would eventually reach Eureka Springs. Nora found herself relaxing around Tate in a way she had not thought possible after the attack. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she was willing to give. If they were sitting together and she suddenly stiffened, remembering unwanted hands on her body, he would quietly give her space until she could breathe again. He seemed to understand instinctively what she needed, whether it was conversation or companionship or comfortable silence. One Sunday in January, unusually warm for the season, Tate took Nora to a secluded spot near a spring-fed creek that ran clear even in winter. They sat on a blanket he had brought, eating the lunch Mrs. Patterson had packed for them: cold chicken, fresh bread, and apple pie. "I have never told anyone about my scars," Nora said suddenly. They had been sitting in comfortable silence, watching the creek flow over smooth rocks. Not the physical ones, I mean. Everyone knows about the attack, but no one has actually seen what it did to me. Tate set down the piece of pie he had been eating. You do not have to show me if you are not ready. I think I want to, Nora said. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the buttons of her high-necked dress. I need you to understand what you are getting into if we continue this courtship. Nora, Tate started, but she shook her head. Please, let me do this. She unbuttoned the dress and pulled it down, revealing the chemise beneath. Then, with trembling fingers, she untied the chemise's ribbon and lowered it to expose her left shoulder and the upper part of her chest. The scars were still angry red, crisscrossing her pale skin like a map of violence. The worst one, the knife wound, ran from her shoulder across her collarbone, puckered and ugly. Tate looked at the scars, and Nora braced herself for revulsion or pity. She had seen her own reflection often enough to know how damaged she looked. But when Tate's eyes met hers again, there was neither disgust nor pity in them. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like reverence. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her shoulder. Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. Tate reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he gently traced the long scar with his fingertips, so lightly she barely felt it. Then he did something completely unexpected. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to the scar, kissing it with infinite tenderness. "This proves how strong you are," he said softly. He moved to the next scar, one that curved around her shoulder. Another gentle kiss. "This proves how strong you are," he continued, kissing each scar he could see, repeating the same phrase like a prayer. "This proves how strong you are. This proves how strong you are." Nora felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time since the attack, they were not tears of pain or shame. They were tears of release, of acceptance, of healing. All her life, she had believed that scars were something to hide, marks of weakness and damage. But Tate was showing her a different truth. The scars were proof she had fought, proof she had survived, proof she was stronger than what had tried to destroy her. When he finally pulled back, she was sobbing. Tate gathered her carefully into his arms, holding her as she cried out months of accumulated grief and fear and self-loathing. He did not try to shush her or tell her everything would be all right. He just held her, solid and warm and safe, letting her purge the poison that had been festering inside her. When the storm finally passed, Nora pulled back slightly to look at him. His shirt was damp from her tears, but he did not seem to care. "How can you be so good?" she asked, her voice rough from crying. "I am not good," Tate said quietly. "I am just a man who knows what it is like to carry scars and wish someone would tell you they do not make you less worthy of love. Your father," Nora remembered, among other things. Tate smiled sadly. "We all have scars, Nora. Some are visible and some are not. But they are part of our story, not the whole of it. You are so much more than what happened to you." Nora leaned her forehead against his. "I think I am falling in love with you," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. She felt rather than saw his smile. "Good," he said. "Because I fell in love with you the first night I saw you in the Silver Dollar, trying so hard to be brave when I could see you were terrified. I have been yours since that moment, Nora Shepherd." They sat by the creek until the sun began to set, talking and dreaming and slowly, tentatively, beginning to believe that they might actually have a future together. When Tate finally took her back to the boarding house, he kissed her for the first time. A gentle press of lips that promised everything and demanded nothing. Mrs. Patterson was waiting up when Nora came inside, practically glowing. "Well," the older woman demanded, "did that cowboy finally tell you he loves you?" "Yes," Nora said, unable to stop smiling. "And I told him I love him too." "About time," Mrs. Patterson said with satisfaction. "I was beginning to think you were both going to dance around it forever. Now I suppose you will be getting married soon." "We have not talked about that yet," Nora said, though the thought sent a thrill through her. "You will," Mrs. Patterson predicted. "That man has marriage in his eyes every time he looks at you. Mark my words, he will propose before spring." She was right. On a mild February afternoon, Tate borrowed Mr. Thornton's best horse and rode into town wearing his Sunday clothes. He found Nora in the boarding house garden, where she was helping Mrs. Patterson plant early vegetables. "Nora, could I speak with you?" he asked, his nervousness evident in the way he twisted his hat in his hands. They walked to a quiet spot behind the boarding house. Tate took both of her hands in his palms calloused from ranch work but infinitely gentle. "I know we have only been courting for a few months," he began. "And I know that by all rights, I should wait longer, do this properly. But Nora, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn refusal to let the world break you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build that ranch we talked about and fill it with laughter and children and love. Will you marry me?" It was not the most eloquent proposal, but it was honest and heartfelt, and it was everything Nora needed to hear. "Yes," she said, launching herself into his arms. "Yes, yes, yes." They married in April of 1879 in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of Eureka Springs. Nora wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, with long lace sleeves that covered her scars. Tate wore a new suit that he had bought specially for the occasion. The guest list was small: Mrs. Patterson, a few of the girls from the Silver Dollar, and some of Tate's friends from the ranch. Nora's brother Samuel was not invited. After the ceremony, Tate took Nora to the property he had been saving for, a beautiful piece of land 20 miles north of Eureka Springs. It was everything he had described: rolling hills perfect for grazing, a creek with year-round water, and a small but sturdy house that the previous owner had built before deciding ranching was not for him. "It needs work," Tate admitted as he carried Nora over the threshold. "The roof leaks in 2 places and the kitchen could use updating, but it is ours." "It is perfect," Nora said, and she meant it. The house was small and rough, but it represented something she had thought she would never have: a home. A real home, with a man who loved her and a future full of possibility. Their first year of marriage was not easy. The ranch work was backbreaking, and money was tight as they built up their herd. Nora worked from dawn to dusk, tending the garden, caring for the chickens they had bought, helping Tate with the cattle when he needed an extra pair of hands. She learned to rope and ride, to brand calves, and to shoot a rifle accurately enough to protect the livestock from predators. But despite the hardships, or perhaps because of them, Nora had never been happier. There was a deep satisfaction in working alongside Tate, building something together. When they fell into bed each night, exhausted, she felt complete in a way she had not known was possible. Tate was an attentive and gentle husband, always careful of her scars, both physical and emotional. On nights when she woke from nightmares about the attack, he would hold her and talk softly until the fear passed. By their first anniversary, the ranch was thriving. They had a modest herd of cattle, several good horses, and a growing reputation for quality livestock. Nora had also discovered she had a talent for raising chickens, and her eggs were in demand at the general store in Eureka Springs. For the first time in her life, she felt proud of what she had accomplished. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson, Nora shared news she had been keeping secret for a week. "Tate, I went to see Dr. Hastings yesterday," she said, taking his hand. Tate immediately looked concerned. "Are you all right? Are you ill?" "No, nothing like that." Nora smiled, placing his hand on her still flat belly. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The joy on Tate's face was indescribable. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby." Their son was born in March of 1880, during a late-season snowstorm that left Tate pacing nervously while Mrs. Patterson and the doctor attended to Nora. The labor was long and difficult, made worse by Nora's memories of violence and helplessness. But when she finally held the baby in her arms, all the pain vanished. "He looks like you," Nora told Tate, studying the infant's tiny face. Same strong jaw, same amber eyes. They named him Thomas, after Tate's grandfather, the only member of his father's family who had shown him kindness. Thomas was a healthy, loud baby who demanded constant attention. Tate proved to be a devoted father, taking over the night feedings so Nora could rest, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, and generally looking at his son with an expression of wonder that never quite faded. As Thomas grew from baby to toddler, Nora marveled at the life she had built. The scared, broken woman who had stumbled into Eureka Springs seemed like a different person, someone from another lifetime. She still had scars and she still occasionally woke from nightmares, but they no longer defined her. She was Nora Thompson now, wife, mother, rancher, and survivor. The scars were simply part of her story, not the ending she had once feared they would be. One afternoon when Thomas was 2 years old, Nora was working in the garden when a familiar figure rode up to the house. It took her a moment to recognize Samuel, her brother. She had not seen him since he had abandoned her at Dr. Hastings' office nearly 3 years earlier. Samuel dismounted awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. "Hello, Nora." "Samuel." Nora's voice was cool. She did not stand to greet him. "I heard you got married, started a ranch. Wanted to come see how you were doing." He looked around at the well-maintained property, the grazing cattle, the sturdy house. "Looks like you have done well for yourself." "No thanks to you," Nora said flatly. Samuel flinched. "I deserved that. Nora, I came to apologize. What I did, turning you away when you needed help, it was wrong, cowardly. I have regretted it every day since." "What changed?" Nora asked. "Did your wife suddenly develop a conscience?" "Margaret left me," Samuel said quietly. "Ran off with a traveling salesman 6 months ago. Took everything of value and left me with nothing but debts. I lost the store." He looked at her pleadingly. "You were right about her. I should have helped you. You are my sister." Nora felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at his betrayal, pity for his current circumstances, and a weary kind of understanding. She thought about everything Tate had taught her about forgiveness and moving forward. She thought about the scars on her shoulder and how Tate had shown her they were marks of strength, not shame. "I forgive you," she said finally. "Not because you deserve it, but because I do not want to carry anger anymore. I have built a good life, Samuel, and I will not let resentment poison it." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but thank you." "However," Nora continued, "forgiveness does not mean forgetting. You made your choice when I needed you, and I have made my life without you. You are welcome to visit occasionally, but do not expect more than that." "I understand," Samuel said. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy, Nora?" Truly happy, Nora thought about Tate, about Thomas, about the ranch they had built together and the future that stretched ahead full of promise. "Yes," she said. "I am happier than I ever thought possible. After Samuel left, Nora went inside to find Tate playing with Thomas, building towers out of wooden blocks that the toddler gleefully knocked down. Tate looked up as she entered, his expression questioning. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Everything is perfect," Nora said, sitting beside them. She watched her husband and son together, her heart full to bursting. "Everything is absolutely perfect." The years passed peacefully. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Thomas proved to be a natural with animals, showing the same gentle touch with horses and cattle that his father possessed. When he was 4, Nora gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, a serious little girl with Nora's dark hair and thoughtful nature. 2 years after that came another son, William, who was as cheerful and outgoing as Thomas was quiet and reserved. Raising 3 children while managing a ranch kept Nora constantly busy, but she would not have traded her life for anything. On difficult days, when the children were fussy, or the cattle got through a fence or money was tight, she would remember the desperate woman she had been in Eureka Springs. She would trace the scars on her shoulder, feeling the ridges under her fingertips, and she would remember Tate's words. "These prove how strong you are." One evening when Thomas was 8, Sarah was 4, and William was 2, the family sat around the dinner table, and Thomas asked a question that made Nora's breath catch. "Mama, how did you and Papa meet?" Nora glanced at Tate, who gave her an encouraging nod. They had agreed to be honest with their children, age appropriately, when the time came. It seemed that time was now. "I met your mother when she was working at a saloon in Eureka Springs," Tate said. "She was the bravest, most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and I knew immediately that I wanted to know her better." "What was Mama doing at a saloon?" Thomas asked, curious. "She was working there," Nora said carefully. "I had come to Arkansas to live with my brother, but some bad things happened, and I needed to find work quickly. The saloon was the only place that would hire me." "What bad things?" Sarah asked. Nora chose her words carefully. "I was hurt by some very bad men. They attacked me and left me with scars. A lot of people in town judged me for what happened, even though it was not my fault. That is why I could not find other work." Thomas's young face was troubled. "That is not fair. It was not your fault." "No, it was not," Tate agreed. "And that is an important lesson. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and it is never the victim's fault. What matters is what you do after the bad thing happens. Your mother could have given up, but she did not. She survived and she built a new life. That is real courage." "You are very brave, Mama," Sarah said seriously. "Thank you, sweetheart," Nora said, her throat tight with emotion. "But I could not have done it without your father. He showed me that I was still worthy of love, scars and all." "I want to see your scars," William announced with a toddler's bluntness. Nora laughed, though there were tears in her eyes. She had long since stopped hiding her scars from her family. In the summer, she often wore short sleeves around the ranch, no longer caring who saw. She pulled down the collar of her dress, showing the children the long scar across her collarbone. "Does it hurt?" Thomas asked, reaching out tentatively to touch it. "Not anymore," Nora said. "It did at first, but it healed. Sometimes I still have bad dreams about what happened, but your father helps me through them." "I will protect you, Mama," Thomas declared with fierce determination. "I will not let anyone hurt you ever again." "I know you will, sweetheart," Nora said, pulling him into a hug. "You are just like your father, brave and kind and strong." That night, after the children were in bed, Nora and Tate sat on the porch, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage. Tate's arm was around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling content and safe. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Marrying someone with so much baggage, someone damaged." Tate tilted her chin up so she had to look at him. You listen to me, Nora Thompson. You are not damaged. You are not baggage. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Every single day with you is a gift. Do you understand? I love you, Nora said, tears streaming down her face. Even after all these years, Tate's absolute faith in her could still move her to tears. I love you too, Tate said, kissing her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that. As they sat together watching the stars come out over their ranch, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been broken, yes, but breaking had not destroyed her. Instead, it had opened her up to healing, to love, to becoming someone stronger than she had ever imagined possible. The scars on her body would never fully fade, but she wore them now with pride rather than shame. They were proof she had survived, proof she had fought. Proof that she was, as Tate had told her so many years ago, remarkably strong. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Thomas grew into a tall, serious young man who had inherited his father's gift with horses. He could gentle the wildest Mustang with patience and kindness, and neighbors from surrounding ranches often brought their problem horses to him. Sarah developed a passionate interest in reading and education, devouring every book she could get her hands on. Nora taught her to read from the few books they owned, and Tate made the long journey to Eureka Springs every few months to buy new ones from the general store. William remained the cheerful heart of the family, always ready with a joke or a song to lighten the mood during difficult times. In 1888, when Thomas was 16, Sarah was 12, and William was 10, the ranch faced its greatest challenge. A late spring blizzard caught everyone by surprise, dumping 3 feet of snow overnight and killing nearly a third of their cattle. The financial loss was devastating. Nora and Tate sat up late into the night, going over their accounts, trying to figure out how they would recover. We might have to sell some of the land, Tate said reluctantly. Keep just enough for a smaller herd and rebuild slowly. No, Nora said firmly. We worked too hard for this land. There has to be another way. I could get work at one of the bigger ranches, Tate suggested. Leave you and the kids to manage things here while I bring in extra money. The thought of Tate being gone for months at a time made Nora's stomach clench with anxiety, but she knew they might not have a choice. Then an idea struck her. What about my chickens? She said. We have nearly 100 laying hens now. What if we expanded the operation? Built more coops, got more chickens, and started selling eggs and meat to the hotels and restaurants in Eureka Springs. I could take a wagon to town twice a week. Tate considered this. It would be a lot of work. We are not afraid of work, Nora pointed out, and it would keep us together. The children could help. Thomas is certainly old enough to take on more responsibility. They decided to try Nora's plan. Using the last of their savings, they bought lumber and built 2 more large chicken coops. They purchased another 50 hens and 2 roosters. Thomas took charge of building the coops with his father, while Sarah helped Nora care for the existing chickens. Even William had his role, collecting eggs each morning before breakfast. The plan worked better than they had dared to hope. The hotels in Eureka Springs were delighted to have a reliable source of fresh eggs and chicken meat. Nora's reputation for quality spread, and soon she had standing orders from 3 hotels, 2 restaurants, and the general store. The income from the chicken operation not only covered their immediate needs, but allowed them to slowly rebuild their cattle herd. During this time, Nora found herself spending more time in Eureka Springs than she had in years. She had avoided the town as much as possible after her marriage, not wanting to be reminded of those dark early days. But now, Driving the wagon full of eggs and chickens twice a week, she found that the town had changed, or perhaps she had changed. People who had once looked at her with pity or judgment now greeted her respectfully. She was not the desperate woman who had worked at the Silver Dollar anymore. She was Mrs. Thompson, a successful rancher and businesswoman. The Silver Dollar itself was still operating, though Douglas Kern had sold it and retired. Nora sometimes saw Paulin, who had also left the saloon and married a shopkeeper. They would wave to each other across the street, two survivors who had found better lives. One day, while delivering eggs to the Grand Hotel, Nora encountered Dr. Hastings in the lobby. He was older now, his hair completely white, but he recognized her immediately. "Mrs. Thompson," he said warmly, "how good to see you. I hear your ranch is doing very well." "We are managing," Nora said. "Thank you for asking. And thank you, Doctor, for everything you did for me all those years ago. I never properly thanked you." "You were very brave," Dr. Hastings said. "I remember thinking at the time that you were either going to break entirely or become something remarkable. I am glad it was the latter." "I had help," Nora said, thinking of Tate. "I could not have done it alone." "The best of us never do," the doctor replied with a smile. That conversation stayed with Nora for days. She realized that she had spent so much time focusing on survival and building her family that she had not fully appreciated how far she had come. She was not just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The scars were still there, of course, both visible and invisible, but they had become part of her story rather than the defining feature. When she shared these thoughts with Tate that night, he pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "I am proud of you," he said. "Not because you survived the attack, though that took tremendous courage. I am proud of you because of everything you have built from those ashes. You turned pain into strength, fear into determination, and loss into love. That is something truly remarkable." In 1891, Thomas announced that he was courting a young woman named Emily Grant, whose family owned a neighboring ranch. Nora liked Emily immediately. She was a practical, hardworking girl with a kind heart and a genuine affection for Thomas. When Thomas asked permission to marry her, both Nora and Tate gave their blessing. The wedding was held at the Thompson Ranch in the summer of 1892. It was a larger affair than Nora and Tate's simple ceremony had been, with guests from several neighboring ranches and a proper reception with music and dancing. As Nora watched her son exchange vows with Emily, she felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "Our boy is all grown up," Tate murmured, his own voice thick with emotion. "He is a good man," Nora said. "You taught him well." "We taught him well," Tate corrected. Thomas and Emily built a small house on the far end of the Thompson property, close enough to help with the ranch work, but far enough to have their own space. Emily proved to be as capable as she was kind, working alongside Nora in the chicken operation and helping Sarah with her studies when time allowed. Sarah, meanwhile, had developed ambitions beyond the ranch. At 14, she announced that she wanted to become a teacher. Nora's heart swelled with pride and fear in equal measure. Teachers needed formal education, which meant Sarah would have to attend the normal school in Little Rock. It also meant she would be far from home, vulnerable to the same dangers that had nearly destroyed Nora. "I know you are worried," Sarah said, displaying the perceptiveness she had always possessed. "But Mama, I cannot let fear stop me from pursuing my dreams. You taught me that. You faced terrible things and did not let them destroy you. I have to be brave too." Nora looked at her daughter, this remarkable young woman she and Tate had raised, and knew she was right. "You are absolutely right," she said, "and I will support you completely. But promise me you will be careful." "I promise," Sarah said, hugging her mother tightly. Sarah left for Little Rock in the fall of 1893. The house felt empty without her bright presence, and Nora worried constantly despite her determination not to. But Sarah's letters arrived weekly, full of enthusiasm for her studies and descriptions of her new friends. She was thriving, and Nora gradually relaxed. William, the youngest, showed no interest in leaving the ranch. He loved the land and the animals with a passion that rivaled even Tate's. "I am going to run this place someday," he announced at age 12 with absolute confidence. "The biggest and best ranch in Arkansas." "I do not doubt it," Tate said, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. The turn of the century arrived with celebration and reflection. On New Year's Day, 1900, the Thompson family gathered for a special dinner. Thomas and Emily were there with their infant son, James, the first grandchild. Sarah was home from school on winter break. William sat at the table with them, nearly as tall as his father now at 16. "I want to make a toast," Tate said, raising his glass. "To family, to the new century, and to the woman who made all of this possible." He looked at Nora with the same love and devotion he had shown the first night they met. "Nora, you took a broken situation and built something beautiful. You are my inspiration, my partner, and the love of my life. Here is to many more years together." "To Mama and Papa," the children echoed, raising their glasses. Nora felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She looked around the table at the faces she loved most in the world, at the life she had built from nothing, and she felt a peace she had once thought impossible. Later that night, alone with Tate in their bedroom, Nora stood before the mirror in her nightgown. The scars on her shoulder and chest were faded now, silvery white instead of angry red, but still visible. She traced them with her fingertips, remembering the day Tate had kissed each one and told her they proved how strong she was. "You know what I think when I see those scars now?" Tate asked, coming to stand behind her. He met her eyes in the mirror. "What?" Nora asked. "I think about how grateful I am to the strength that got you through that day and brought you to me. I think about how those scars are part of the woman I love, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. They are not marks of damage, Nora. They are proof of survival, of resilience, of the unbreakable spirit that I fell in love with." He kissed her shoulder, just as he had done all those years ago by the creek. "These prove how strong you are," he whispered against her skin. Nora turned in his arms, wrapping her own around his neck. "I love you, Tate Thompson. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." "Always," he promised. "I will always see you, all of you, and love every part." The years continued their steady march forward. Sarah graduated from the normal school and returned to Eureka Springs to teach at the newly built schoolhouse. She met and married a fellow teacher named Peter Wilson, and they built a house in town. William took over more and more of the ranch operations, as Tate's knees began to protest the long hours in the saddle. Thomas and Emily had 3 more children, filling the ranch with the sound of laughter and small running feet. Nora's chicken operation became one of the most successful in the region. She hired 2 women from town to help with the work, giving them the kind of opportunity she had once desperately needed. One of them was a widow struggling to support her children. The other was a young woman recovering from an abusive marriage. Nora taught them the business and paid them fair wages, and in return, they gave her loyalty and dedication. In 1905, at the age of 44, Nora published a small pamphlet on raising chickens for profit. It was sold through the general store and agricultural suppliers throughout Arkansas and even into neighboring states. People began to seek out her advice, writing letters from as far away as Texas and Missouri. Nora found herself becoming something of an expert, invited to speak at agricultural fairs and meetings. Tate teased her gently about her fame. "My wife, the chicken magnate," he would say with a grin. "Better than my husband, the old cowboy," she would retort, and they would laugh together as they had been laughing for nearly 30 years. But time, relentless and unstoppable, began to take its toll. In the winter of 1908, Tate developed a persistent cough that would not go away. Dr. Hastings, himself quite elderly now, diagnosed pneumonia and prescribed rest. Tate, stubborn as ever, insisted he would be fine and continued working until Nora physically blocked him from leaving the house. "You are going to rest if I have to tie you to the bed," she declared, hands on her hips. "I would like to see you try," Tate said, but he was smiling. He let her lead him back to bed, where he stayed for the next 3 weeks while Nora nursed him back to health. During those long days and nights, Nora was reminded viscerally of how precious their time together was. Watching Tate struggle to breathe, seeing him weak and vulnerable, made her realize how much she still needed him, how much she would always need him. When he finally recovered, she held him tightly and whispered, "Do not ever scare me like that again." "I will do my best," he promised. "But Nora, we are getting older. We need to talk about what happens when one of us is gone." "I do not want to talk about that," Nora said, but she knew he was right. They spent an evening going over their affairs, making sure everything was in order for their children. The ranch would go to William, as he had always wanted. Thomas would receive a portion of the cattle herd to start his own operation if he chose. Sarah would inherit Nora's share of the chicken business, which she could sell or continue as she saw fit. It was practical and necessary, but it filled Nora with melancholy. "I am not ready to lose you," she told Tate as they lay in bed that night. "I am not ready to lose you either," he replied, pulling her close. "But when that day comes, whenever it comes, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. You made me better than I would have been without you. You saved me," Nora said simply. "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Tate corrected. "That is what love does." Thankfully, they had many more years together. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909 with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. By this time, they had 7 grandchildren, with an 8th on the way. The house was full of noise and chaos and love. Looking at the family they had created, Nora marveled at the path her life had taken. From the terrified woman stumbling into Eureka Springs with nothing but scars and broken dreams, she had become this: matriarch of a loving family, successful businesswoman, respected member of the community. The transformation still amazed her. In the quiet moments when the grandchildren were napping and the adult children were occupied with their own conversations, Nora and Tate would steal away to their favorite spot on the porch. It was the same porch where they had spent countless evenings over the years, talking and dreaming and simply being together. "You remember the first time I told you I loved you?" Nora asked one such afternoon. "By the creek," Tate said immediately. "You said you thought you were falling in love with me, and I told you I had been yours since the first moment I saw you." "Do you still feel that way?" Nora asked, even though she knew the answer. "More than ever," Tate said, taking her hand. "You are woven into every part of me, Nora. I could not separate myself from loving you any more than I could separate myself from breathing." "That is exactly how I feel," Nora said. She looked down at their joined hands, hers wrinkled now and spotted with age, his gnarled from decades of hard work. They were not the young couple who had married in the spring of 1879, but the love between them had only deepened with time. Tate raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, gently. Then, with the same tenderness he had shown all those years ago, he pushed back the sleeve of her dress and kissed the scars on her arm, one by one. "These prove how strong you are," he said, just as he had said so many times before. But this time, Nora added her own truth. "And these," she said, touching his face gently, "prove how loved I am." The seasons continued their endless cycle, and the Thompson ranch prospered through good years and bad. In 1912, William married a spirited young woman named Catherine who had grown up on a ranch in Missouri. They built their own house on the property and began raising their family while managing the day-to-day ranch operations. Thomas expanded his own herd and was doing well. Sarah had become the headmistress of the Eureka Springs School, a position of respect and influence. Nora and Tate, now in their 60s, had earned the right to slow down. They still helped around the ranch when needed, but mostly they enjoyed their grandchildren and each other's company. They had become that older couple that younger people looked to as an example of lasting love, though few knew the full story of how they had come together. On a warm spring evening in 1915, Nora and Tate celebrated their 36th anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. The children had offered to host a party, but they had declined, preferring the intimacy of their own company. 36 years, Nora mused, sipping the wine William had brought them from town. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. Both are true, Tate said. Time is strange that way. Do you have any regrets? Nora asked. Only one, Tate said, and Nora's heart skipped a beat until he continued. I wish I had kissed you sooner. That first night at the Silver Dollar, when I saw you trying so hard to be brave, I wanted to tell you right then that you were going to be all right, that I would make sure of it. But I was afraid of scaring you away. Nora laughed. I probably would have run screaming. I was terrified of everything back then. Not everything, Tate said seriously. You were never afraid of doing what needed to be done, of surviving, of fighting for yourself. That is what I saw in you even when you could not see it in yourself. I see it now, Nora said. Thanks to you. Thanks to you, Tate corrected. I just held up a mirror. You did the hard work of healing and growing and becoming. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. The ranch stretched out before them, a living testament to their love and hard work. Cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. The chicken coops hummed with activity. Smoke rose from William and Catherine's chimney, and in the distance they could hear the laughter of grandchildren playing. This is everything I never knew I wanted, Nora said quietly. A home, a family peace. I thought I had lost my chance at this when those men attacked me. I thought I was too broken for happiness. You were never broken, Tate said firmly. Hurt, yes. Traumatized, absolutely, but never broken. Breaking implies you could not be whole again, and you were always whole, Nora. You just needed time and support to remember that. Nora turned to face him fully. Even after all these years, the sight of him still made her heart flutter. His hair was mostly gray now, and deep lines marked his face, but his amber eyes still held the same warmth and love they had always shown her. I need you to promise me something, she said. Anything, Tate replied without hesitation. When I am gone, when it is just you, I need you to promise me you will not give up, that you will keep living, keep finding joy. Our children and grandchildren will need you. Nora, Tate started, but she held up a hand. I need to say this. We are getting older and we have to face reality. One of us will go first, and whether it is you or me, the one left behind has to keep going. Promise me. I promise, Tate said, though his voice was rough with emotion. But you have to promise me the same thing. I promise, Nora said. They sealed the promise with a kiss, tender and sweet, full of 3 decades of shared life and love. Time proved generous to them. They had several more good years together, watching their family continue to grow and thrive. More grandchildren arrived. The ranch expanded. Sarah's school thrived under her leadership. Life was good. But in the winter of 1918, Tate's old pneumonia returned, complicated now by age and a lifetime of hard work. This time, despite Nora's devoted nursing and Dr. Hastings' best efforts, he did not recover. On a cold January night, surrounded by his wife and children, Tate Thompson passed away peacefully. Nora felt like half of herself had been torn away. The pain was worse than the attack had been, worse than anything she had ever experienced. Tate had been her anchor, her safe harbor, her great love. Without him, she felt adrift in a way she had not felt since those early desperate days in Eureka Springs. But she had made him a promise, and she intended to keep it. So, instead of giving in to grief, she let herself feel it, let it wash over her in waves, but she did not let it drown her. She leaned on her children, who surrounded her with love and support. She continued her work with the chickens, finding comfort in the familiar routine. And every evening, she sat on the porch where she and Tate had spent so many happy hours, talking to him as if he were still there. "I miss you," she would say to the empty air. "The bed is too big without you. The house is too quiet, but I am keeping my promise. I am still here, still living because you taught me how." 6 months after Tate's death, on a warm summer evening, Nora sat on the porch with her youngest grandson, 5-year-old Tate Jr., named after his grandfather. The boy was curious and full of questions, much like William had been at that age. "Grandma, why do you have those marks on your arm?" he asked, pointing to her scars. Nora had long since stopped hiding them, and in the warm weather, she wore short sleeves without shame. Nora looked down at the scars, faded to silvery white after 40 years but still visible. She thought about how to answer, how to explain to this innocent child the darkness that had once nearly destroyed her. "These are scars," she said gently. "A long time ago, before I met your grandfather, some bad men hurt me. These marks are what is left from that. Did it hurt?" The boy asked, his eyes wide. "Very much," Nora admitted, "but they do not hurt anymore." "Grandma, are you sad that you have scars?" Tate Jr. asked with a child's directness. Nora considered the question seriously. Once she would have said yes without hesitation. The scars had been a source of shame and pain, visible reminders of the worst day of her life. But that was before Tate had kissed each one and told her they proved how strong she was. Before she had built a life that included but was not defined by trauma. "No, sweetheart," she said finally. "I am not sad about my scars anymore. They are part of my story, part of what made me who I am. Your grandfather taught me that scars are not something to be ashamed of. They prove that we survived something difficult and came out the other side." "Grandpa was smart," Tate Jr. said seriously. "The smartest man I ever knew," Nora agreed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "And the kindest. He saw me at my worst and loved me anyway. He taught me how to love myself again." The boy climbed into her lap, hugging her tightly. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, sweetheart," Nora said, holding him close. "So very much." As she sat there with her grandson in her arms, watching the sun set over the ranch she and Tate had built, Nora felt a profound sense of peace. Yes, she missed Tate with an ache that would never fully heal. But he had given her so much: love, family, confidence, joy. He had shown her that surviving was not just about staying alive, but about truly living. The scars on her body would be with her until her dying day, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her journey, proof that she had faced darkness and emerged into light. Tate had been right all along. The scars proved how strong she was. Nora Thompson lived for another 12 years after her husband's death, surrounded by the love of her family. She watched her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren arrive. She continued working with her chickens until age finally forced her to retire. She spent her final years being cared for in the home she and Tate had built, comfortable and content. On a spring morning in 1930, Nora passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 69. Her children and grandchildren gathered for the funeral, sharing stories of the remarkable woman she had been. They spoke of her strength, her kindness, her business acumen, and her unwavering love for her family. But it was William, her youngest son, who perhaps understood her best. At the funeral, he shared a story from his childhood. "When I was about 10 years old," he said, "I asked my mother about the scars on her shoulder. I knew she had been attacked, but I wanted to understand what they meant to her. She took me aside and told me about the day of the attack, how she had fought back, how she had pretended to be dead to survive. Then she told me about meeting my father, about how he kissed each scar and told her they proved how strong she was." William paused, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother told me that day that scars are not marks of shame. They are badges of survival. She said that everyone carries scars, some visible and some not, but what matters is what we do with the pain that caused them. Do we let it destroy us, or do we let it make us stronger? My mother chose strength, every single day, and she taught all of us to do the same." As Nora was laid to rest beside Tate under the spreading oak tree on the ranch they had built together, her family stood united in grief and love. The ranch would continue under William's capable management. Sarah's school would continue educating generations of children. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren would carry forward the lessons Nora and Tate had taught them about love, resilience, and the strength to survive. The scars that had once marked Nora as a victim had become, through love and time, symbols of something far more powerful: the unbreakable human spirit and its capacity not just to survive, but to thrive. Tate had seen that truth in her from the very beginning, and he had spent his life showing her until she could see it too. Their love story, born from darkness but blooming into light, would be told and retold through the generations. And always at the heart of it would be the moment when a cowboy looked at a scared woman's scars and saw not damage but proof of strength, when he kissed those scars and told her a truth she desperately needed to hear. These prove how strong you are. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the attack that had tried to destroy Nora Shepherd, but the love that had helped her become Nora Thompson. Not the scars themselves, but what they had come to represent: survival, resilience, and the transformative power of unconditional love. The ranch still stands today, run by the descendants of Nora and Tate Thompson. And if you visit on a quiet evening, you might imagine you can still see them sitting on that porch, hands entwined, watching the sunset over the land they built together. Proof that love really can heal even the deepest wounds.